Long before crane steel or architectural blueprints existed, ancient civilizations constructed monuments that still leave modern engineers in silence. Massive stone blocks weighing dozens of tons, stacked with near-perfect precision walls built without mortar that have withstood earthquakes, storms, and thousands of years of history, and entire cities aligned with celestial axes where sunlight touches a single precise point on one specific day of the year. This was not merely architecture. It was a declaration carved in stone, a statement of knowledge and power. How did they measure with such accuracy without modern instruments? Why did certain advanced techniques seem to appear suddenly only to vanish without a trace? And are we underestimating the true intelligence of civilizations now buried beneath the dust of time? When we look at those ancient walls, we do not simply see stone. We see an enormous question about the true capabilities of humanity in the distant past. Across the rugged landscapes of Sardinia, an island set apart in the Western Mediterranean, there exists a silent network of ancient stone structures that defy simple explanation, known today as the tombs of the giants. These megalithic monuments stretch across hills, valleys, and remote plains, standing as enduring remnants of a civilization that left no written records yet achieved architectural feats that continue to puzzle modern researchers. At first glance, they appear to be burial sites, but their scale, design, and symbolic features suggest something far more complex, something that blurs the line between tomb temple and ritual landscape. The discovery of these structures did not occur in a single dramatic moment, but unfolded gradually over centuries. Local populations had long been aware of these massive stone formations, weaving them into folklore and myth, often attributing their construction to ancient giants or supernatural beings. It was only during the 19th and early 20th centuries that systematic archaeological attention began to take shape. Scholars and explorers traveling through Italy started documenting these sites with increasing precision, recognizing patterns in their structure and distribution. Early excavations revealed human remains, pottery fragments, and ritual objects, confirming that these were indeed burial sites. Yet even then, questions began to emerge. Why were they so large? And why were they designed to accommodate entire communities rather than individuals? Dating these tombs placed them firmly within the Bronze Age, constructed by the enigmatic Nuragic civilization between approximately 1800 and 1200 BCE. This civilization is best known for its towering stone structures called nuraghe, but the tombs represent another dimension of their worldview, one centered on death, ancestry, and collective identity. Unlike the monumental tombs of Egypt that glorified individual rulers, these Sardinian structures appear to emphasize the group over the individual, suggesting a society where identity may have been rooted in lineage, clan, or shared belief, rather than personal legacy. Architecturally, the tombs are both simple and astonishing. A long, narrow burial corridor built from massive stone slabs extends backward into the earth, covered by layers of smaller stones and soil forming a low mound. At the front stands a semicircular arrangement of upright stones known as an exedra, creating an open, almost theatrical space that seems designed to gather people. At the center of this facade rises a taller, often carefully shaped stone stele, sometimes featuring a small opening at its base, possibly serving as a symbolic or ritual entrance. The precision with which these elements are arranged raises immediate questions. How did a Bronze Age society, without advanced machinery or written engineering knowledge, achieve such consistency and durability across hundreds of sites? Archaeological excavations throughout the 20th century brought further insight but also deeper mystery. Skeletal remains found within the corridors indicated that these were collective burial sites used repeatedly over generations. In some cases, dozens of individuals were interred within a single tomb, often accompanied by modest grave goods. Yet the absence of clear hierarchical differences among the burials challenges assumptions about social stratification, suggesting that these tombs may have served entire communities equally, a rare concept in ancient monumental architecture. Furthermore, chemical and osteological analyses have revealed patterns of health, diet, and movement, hinting at a population that was both resilient and interconnected, but still leaving open the question of why such immense effort was dedicated to communal burial practices. One of the most persistent mysteries lies in the orientation and placement of these tombs. Many are aligned toward the east or southeast, subtly facing the direction of the rising sun. This has led researchers to propose connections with solar cycles, rebirth symbolism, and cosmological beliefs. The exedra, with its wide embracing curve, may have functioned as a gathering space for rituals tied to these cycles, perhaps ceremonies marking transitions between life and death or seasonal events that reinforced communal identity. Yet no written records survive to confirm these interpretations, leaving scholars to rely on architectural clues and comparative analysis with other prehistoric cultures. Comparisons have often been drawn between the tombs of Sardinia and other megalithic sites across Europe, such as Stonehenge in England or Newgrange in Ireland, both of which demonstrate sophisticated alignments with celestial events. However, Sardinia's tombs differ in their sheer number and their consistent communal function, suggesting that while there may have been shared ideas or parallel developments across prehistoric Europe, the neuralgic approach to death and monumentality was uniquely focused on collective experience rather than individual commemoration. Excavations in sites such as Coduvecchio and Lilolgi have revealed subtle variations in construction techniques, indicating that these tombs were not built all at once, but evolved over time. Earlier examples feature simpler stone arrangements, while later structures display more refined shaping and alignment. This progression hints at an accumulation of knowledge passed down through generations, an oral tradition of engineering and ritual practice that allowed the civilization to refine its methods without written documentation. Yet even with these advancements, the fundamental purpose of the tombs appears to remain consistent, reinforcing the idea of continuity in belief systems over centuries. The question of how these massive stones were transported and erected remains one of the most debated topics among researchers. Some theories suggest the use of wooden rollers, ropes, and coordinated labor, while others propose more sophisticated techniques involving leverage and earthen ramps. Experimental archaeology has attempted to replicate these processes with varying degrees of success, demonstrating that while possible, such construction would have required significant organization, manpower, and planning, pointing to a society capable of mobilizing large groups for shared projects, a hallmark of complex social structures. Equally intriguing is the cultural and symbolic meaning behind the tomb's design. The elongated corridor has been interpreted by some as a metaphorical passage, perhaps representing a journey from life to death or from the human world to an ancestral realm. The central stele standing tall at the entrance may have functioned as a marker of transition, a boundary between worlds, or even as a focal point for offerings and communication. With the dead folklore preserved on the island speaks of ancient giants buried within these structures, a narrative that, while not supported by scientific evidence, reflects the profound impression these monuments have made on human imagination across generations. Despite decades of study, the megalithic tombs of Sardinia continue to resist definitive explanation. Each excavation answers certain questions while raising new ones, revealing a civilization that was both technologically capable and deeply spiritual, yet ultimately elusive. Their builders left behind no written language to explain their intentions, no inscriptions to guide interpretation, only stone carefully shaped and deliberately placed, enduring through millennia as a silent testament to beliefs and practices that remain just beyond our full understanding. In this way, the tombs are not merely archaeological sites, but active mysteries inviting each generation to reinterpret their meaning. In the end, the tombs of the giants stand as one of the most compelling examples of how ancient societies confronted the universal reality of death, not as isolated individuals, but as unified communities, transforming burial into a shared, monumental act that bridged the gap between the living and the dead, and perhaps in ways we still struggle to comprehend, between the human world and something beyond it. Across the northern reaches of Japan, on the island of Hokkaido, there exists a people whose appearance has puzzled explorers, historians, and scientists for centuries. Known as the Ainu people, they have long stood apart from surrounding populations not only in culture and language, but in something far more striking: their physical features. Early observers described them as having thick beards, wavy hair, deep-set eyes, and facial structures that seemed at least superficially closer to Europeans than to East Asians. This unexpected resemblance would spark one of the most enduring and controversial questions in the study of ancient human history. Who were the Ainu, and where did they truly come from? The story of their discovery, at least from the perspective of the outside world, begins in the early modern period. Although the Ainu had lived in the region for thousands of years, they remained largely unknown to outsiders until Japanese expansion pushed northward during the Edo period, and later when European explorers and traders began documenting their encounters in the 18th and 19th centuries. These early accounts were often filled with fascination and confusion. Travelers noted that the Ainu did not resemble the Japanese populations they had previously encountered. Russian explorers, in particular, described them as hairy and almost Caucasian in appearance, a characterization that would echo through academic debates for generations. At a time when physical anthropology relied heavily on visual classification, such observations led to bold and often flawed conclusions about their origins. Yet long before these encounters, the roots of the Ainu story stretched deep into prehistory. Archaeological evidence points to a connection between the Ainu and the ancient Jomon people, a group that inhabited the Japanese archipelago as early as 14,000 years ago. The Jomon culture is known for its distinctive pottery, some of the oldest in the world, as well as a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that persisted even as agricultural societies developed elsewhere. Over thousands of years, as waves of migrants from continental Asia entered Japan, bringing rice cultivation and new technologies, the descendants of the Jomon were gradually pushed northward. In this process, the ancestors of the Ainu became increasingly isolated, preserving genetic and cultural traits that would later appear unusual to outsiders. The timeline of Ainu development is not marked by grand empires or monumental architecture, but rather by continuity and adaptation. From around the first millennium CE, the Ainu culture began to emerge more distinctly in the archaeological record, particularly in Hokkaido and surrounding regions such as Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. Their society was built around hunting, fishing, and trade, with a deep spiritual worldview rooted in animism. They believed that all elements of nature, animals, plants, rivers, and even tools, possessed a spiritual essence known as kamui. Among their most well-known rituals was the Iomanti ceremony, in which a bear, revered as a divine being, was ritually sent back to the spirit world. This complex belief system, along with their language and artistic traditions, showed little direct connection to neighboring cultures, adding another layer to their mystery. As interest in the Ainu grew during the 19th and early 20th centuries, so too did efforts to study them scientifically. Early anthropologists measured skulls, catalogued physical traits, and attempted to classify the Ainu within existing racial frameworks. Some proposed that they were remnants of a Caucasoid population that had once spread across Eurasia. Others suggested links to ancient Europeans or even to lost tribes migrating across vast distances. These theories, while imaginative, were largely based on superficial observations and limited data. They reflected more about the scientific assumptions of the time than about the true history of the Ainu. Modern archaeology and genetics have since transformed our understanding. Excavations across Hokkaido and northern Japan have uncovered settlements, tools, and burial sites that trace a clear cultural evolution from the Jomon period to later Ainu society. Meanwhile, advances in DNA analysis have provided more definitive answers about their origins. Genetic studies reveal that the Ainu are indeed most closely related to the Jomon people, forming a lineage that is distinct from both modern Japanese populations and Europeans. While there are minor genetic contributions from neighboring groups, the core of Ainu ancestry remains deeply rooted in this ancient population. In other words, their European-like features are not the result of shared ancestry with Europeans, but rather an example of how similar traits can emerge independently in different human populations. Despite these scientific breakthroughs, several mysteries remain unresolved. One of the most intriguing questions is why the Ainu developed such distinctive physical characteristics in the first place. Environmental adaptation, genetic drift, and long-term isolation may all have played a role, but no single explanation fully accounts for the combination of traits observed. Another mystery lies in their cultural uniqueness. While trade networks connected them to neighboring regions, their language remains a linguistic isolate unrelated to any major language family. Their religious practices, artistic motifs, and social structures also resist easy classification, suggesting a long period of independent cultural evolution. Archaeological research continues to shed light on these questions, but it also reveals how much has been lost. During the Meiji era, in the late 19th century, the Japanese government formally incorporated Hokkaido, leading to rapid modernization and assimilation policies that profoundly affected the Ainu. Traditional lifestyles were disrupted, the Ainu language declined, and many cultural practices were suppressed. As a result, some aspects of their heritage disappeared before they could be fully documented. This loss has left gaps in the historical record, making it more difficult for researchers to reconstruct a complete picture of their past. Today, the Ainu are recognized as an indigenous people of Japan, and there are ongoing efforts to preserve and revive their culture. Museums, cultural centers, and academic institutions are working to document their traditions, language, and history. At the same time, new technologies such as advanced genetic sequencing and digital archaeology offer the possibility of uncovering further insights into their origins. Yet even as science provides clearer answers, the Ainu continue to occupy a unique place in the narrative of human history, standing at the intersection of myth, mystery, and evidence. In the end, the idea of the Ainu as a European-like people says less about who they are and more about how humans have tried to understand difference. Their story is not one of misplaced identity, but of deep antiquity, resilience, and cultural independence. They are not remnants of Europe hidden in Asia, but rather descendants of one of the oldest populations in the region, carrying forward a legacy that stretches back thousands of years. And perhaps the true mystery is not why they look different, but how much of their story still remains untold, waiting to be rediscovered beneath the layers of time. Across the vast plains of ancient South Asia, long before the rise of empires recorded in clear written histories, there existed a civilization that seemed to thrive in silence. The Indus Valley civilization, stretching across what is now Pakistan and northwest India, left behind cities of remarkable precision, advanced drainage systems, and an urban planning philosophy far ahead of its time. Yet among its most intriguing remnants are not its streets or its architecture, but rather a collection of small, enigmatic objects, figurines crafted from clay, bronze, and stone. These miniature forms discovered in cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa continue to challenge modern understanding, raising a single persistent question: what were they truly made for? The story of these figurines begins not in antiquity, but in the early 20th century, when archaeologists first uncovered the ruins of the Indus cities. Excavations led by figures such as John Marshall revealed a civilization dating back to approximately 2600 BCE1 that rivaled the great cultures of Egypt and Mesopotamia. As layers of earth were removed, thousands of small artifacts emerged among them, figurines of humans and animals often fragmented, sometimes crudely shaped, and occasionally astonishingly refined. Unlike monumental statues or inscriptions, these objects were intimate in scale, suggesting they were meant to be handled, carried, or displayed within private spaces. From the earliest stages of excavation, scholars attempted to classify these figurines, searching for patterns that might reveal their purpose. Many of the most commonly found examples depict female forms, often with exaggerated anatomical features such as wide hips and prominent breasts. These characteristics led to an early and influential interpretation that the figurines represented a mother goddess, a symbol of fertility and regeneration. This theory drew parallels with other ancient cultures where fertility deities played central roles in religious life. However, as more evidence accumulated, the simplicity of this explanation began to unravel. Not all figurines were female, and not all shared the same stylistic traits. Some appeared hastily made, lacking the refinement typically associated with sacred objects. This inconsistency raised doubts about whether they truly represented divine figures. Among the most famous discoveries is the bronze statuette known as the Dancing Girl of Mohenjo-daro, a small yet striking piece that seems almost anachronistic in its realism. With one hand resting on her hip and her posture conveying confidence and movement, the figure stands apart from the more abstract terracotta forms. The level of craftsmanship suggests a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy and artistic expression, hinting at a cultural depth that is only partially understood. Yet even this iconic figure offers no clear answers. Is she a performer, a symbol of status, or a representation of ritual practice? The absence of written explanation leaves these questions unresolved. Compounding the mystery is the undeciphered nature of the Indus script. Unlike the hieroglyphs of Egypt or the cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia, the symbols of the Indus civilization remain silent. Without the ability to read their texts, archaeologists are left to interpret meaning through context alone. Figurines found in residential areas might suggest domestic use, while those discovered in specific concentrations could imply ritual significance. Yet the evidence is often ambiguous, resisting definitive conclusions. Animal figurines add another layer of complexity. Bulls, elephants, and other creatures appear frequently, sometimes rendered with remarkable attention to detail. In a society where agriculture and trade were vital, these animals may have held economic importance, symbolizing wealth or power. Alternatively, they could represent totemic beliefs or mythological narratives that have since been lost to time. Some figurines even depict hybrid or stylized forms, blurring the line between realism and symbolism. Without accompanying texts or clear ritual spaces, their meaning remains elusive. What makes the Indus figurines particularly unusual is the broader cultural context in which they were created. Unlike contemporaneous civilizations, the Indus world shows little evidence of large-scale religious monuments. There are no towering temples, no colossal statues of gods, and no elaborate tombs designed to glorify rulers. This absence has led some scholars to propose that the Indus people practiced a form of spirituality that was decentralized, perhaps embedded in daily life, rather than expressed through grand architecture. If this is the case, the figurines may have served as personal objects of belief, used in household rituals or individual practices rather than organized ceremonies. Over the decades, numerous excavations have attempted to shed light on these questions. Sites across the Indus region have yielded thousands of figurines, each adding a fragment to the puzzle, but never completing it. Advances in technology, including microscopic analysis and residue testing, have provided insights into how these objects were made and used. Some show signs of wear, suggesting they were handled frequently, while others appear to have been deliberately broken, possibly as part of ritual activity. Yet even with these discoveries, the central mystery endures. Modern interpretations remain divided. Some researchers argue that the figurines were primarily toys crafted for children and reflecting aspects of everyday life. Others maintain that their symbolic features indicate religious or spiritual significance. A third perspective suggests that they may have served multiple functions simultaneously, their meaning shifting depending on context. In a society as complex as the Indus civilization, it is entirely possible that a single object could embody practical, social, and spiritual roles all at once. As the ruins of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa continue to be studied, the figurines stand as quiet witnesses to a lost world. They offer glimpses of human expression of creativity, belief, and identity, yet they withhold their full story. Perhaps this ambiguity is what makes them so compelling. In their silence, they invite interpretation, challenging each generation to reconsider what it means to understand the past. Until the script of the Indus civilization is finally deciphered, if that day ever comes. The true purpose of these figurines will remain one of archaeology's most enduring enigmas, a reminder that even the smallest objects can hold the greatest mysteries. In the remote, arid landscapes of northeastern Brazil, within the vast expanse of Serra da Capivara National Park, lies one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites on Earth. Scattered across cliffs, caves, and sandstone shelters are thousands of ancient paintings, silent witnesses to a past that may challenge everything we think we know about human history in the Americas. These images, painted in vivid reds and ochres, depict scenes of life, ritual, and movement, but their true significance remains a subject of intense debate. Are they merely remnants of early human expression, or do they represent evidence of a civilization far older than accepted timelines allow? The story of Serra da Capivara began to unfold in the 20th century, when local discoveries of rock paintings attracted the attention of researchers. However, it was not until the work of Brazilian archaeologist Guidon in the 1970s that the site gained international prominence. Guidon and her team conducted systematic surveys and excavations, revealing an astonishing density of archaeological material. What they found was not just art, but traces of human habitation, charcoal from ancient fires, stone tools, and stratified layers suggesting repeated occupation over immense spans of time. These findings transformed Serra da Capivara from a regional curiosity into a focal point of global archaeological inquiry. Dating the site, however, would prove to be its most controversial aspect. Radiocarbon analysis of charcoal remains suggested that human presence in the region could date back more than 20,000 years, with some estimates pushing even further to 30,000 or beyond. Such dates stand in stark contrast to the widely accepted Clovis First model, which proposes that humans arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago via a land bridge from Siberia. If the Serra da Capivara evidence is accurate, it implies that humans reached South America far earlier than previously believed, possibly through alternative migration routes, including coastal or transoceanic pathways. This possibility has ignited decades of debate, with some scholars embracing the implications, while others question the reliability of the dating methods and the interpretation of the evidence. Beyond the question of age, the rock art itself presents another layer of mystery. Unlike many prehistoric sites, where depictions are limited primarily to animals, the paintings here are remarkably dynamic and narrative in nature. Human figures appear in groups engaged in what seem to be coordinated activities, hunting, dancing, or participating in ritualistic ceremonies. Some scenes suggest complex social structures, with individuals interacting in organized patterns rather than acting in isolation. There are also abstract forms and symbolic elements that resist straightforward interpretation, raising questions about belief systems, communication, and the cognitive world of their creators. The sophistication of these compositions suggests not only artistic skill, but also the presence of shared cultural meanings that have long since been lost. Archaeological excavations throughout the late 20th and early 21st centuries have continued to expand our understanding of the site. Multiple layers of occupation have been identified, indicating that the region was inhabited over thousands of years. Stone tools discovered in association with the paintings show varying levels of technological development, hinting at either a long evolutionary sequence or the presence of different cultural groups over time. Evidence of controlled fire, including hearth structures and burnt remains, further supports the argument for sustained human activity. Yet despite these findings, critics argue that natural processes could account for some of the evidence, particularly the charcoal deposits used for dating. This ongoing disagreement highlights the difficulty of reconstructing deep prehistory, where evidence is fragmentary and interpretations can vary widely. Another unresolved question concerns the identity and origins of the people who created the Serra da Capivara art. If they indeed predate the Clovis culture, then they may represent an entirely separate wave of migration into the Americas. Some hypotheses suggest early coastal migrations from Asia, while others propose more controversial scenarios, including transatlantic crossings from Africa or Europe. Although such ideas remain speculative, the sheer antiquity suggested by the site forces researchers to reconsider established models and remain open to alternative explanations. Genetic studies of modern and ancient populations have yet to provide definitive answers, leaving the question of these early inhabitants shrouded in uncertainty. In addition to its archaeological significance, Serra da Capivara also raises broader questions about the nature of human creativity and cultural development. The persistence of color in the paintings, the apparent intentionality of their placement, and the recurring motifs across different sites all point to a deeply rooted symbolic tradition. These were not random markings, but deliberate acts of expression, possibly tied to identity, memory, or spirituality. The landscape itself, with its dramatic rock formations and secluded shelters, may have played a role in shaping these practices, serving as both a canvas and a sacred environment. Today, Serra da Capivara stands as a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a testament to the enduring mystery of our origins. It is a place where science, speculation, and imagination intersect, challenging researchers to piece together a story from fragments of stone and pigment. Each new excavation, each refined dating technique brings us closer to understanding, but never quite to certainty. The site continues to provoke questions that extend beyond archaeology, touching on migration, adaptation, and the very definition of what it means to be human. As the sun sets over the rugged terrain of Piauí, the ancient paintings remain unchanged and silent, carrying within them echoes of lives lived tens of thousands of years ago. Whether they ultimately rewrite the history of the Americas or simply add complexity to it, one thing is clear: Serra da Capivara is not just a window into the past, it is a reminder that the past itself may be far more intricate and far more mysterious than we have ever imagined. Rising abruptly from the rolling plains of northeastern Wyoming, Devil's Tower stands as one of the most striking geological formations in North America. A monolithic column of stone that appears almost impossibly deliberate in its shape and symmetry, as if carved rather than formed. And yet its true origins remain a subject of both scientific study and enduring mystery, particularly when considering the persistent and controversial idea that hidden within or beneath this massive structure may lie an unexplored cave system that has never been fully understood or confirmed. Long before modern science attempted to explain Devil's Tower, the site was already deeply embedded in the oral traditions of Native American tribes, including the Lakota Cheyenne and Kiowa, whose stories describe the tower not as a natural accident, but as a place of transformation and divine intervention where the earth itself rose upward to protect a group of children from a monstrous bear, leaving behind the long vertical grooves that still mark the tower's surface today. A narrative that, while symbolic, intriguingly aligns with the tower's unusual physical features and suggests that ancient observers may have recognized its uniqueness in ways that modern geology is still attempting to fully interpret. The first recorded encounter by Euro-American explorers occurred in 1875 during the Black Hills expedition led by Colonel Richard Irving Dodge, who documented the formation and gave it the name Devil's Tower, a mistranslation of a native term that more accurately referred to it as a sacred or spiritual site, rather than something sinister. And from that moment onward, the tower entered the scientific and cultural consciousness of the United States, eventually being designated as the nation's first national monument in 1906 by President Theodore Roosevelt, marking a significant milestone in its modern history while simultaneously limiting invasive exploration that might otherwise have revealed more about its internal structure. Geologically, Devil's Tower is widely believed to be an igneous intrusion, formed when molten rock forced its way upward into layers of sedimentary rock and cooled slowly underground, creating the distinctive hexagonal columns that are now exposed after millions of years of erosion stripped away the surrounding material. Yet even within this explanation, questions remain, particularly regarding the remarkable uniformity and vertical precision of the columns, which rise in near-perfect alignment and give the tower an appearance that many have compared to engineered architecture rather than a random natural process. It is within this context that the idea of a cave system begins to emerge, not as a confirmed reality, but as a persistent hypothesis fueled by both geological reasoning and anecdotal accounts. Since volcanic formations can, under certain conditions, contain voids, fractures, or internal chambers created by uneven cooling or trapped gases. And some researchers have speculated that Devil's Tower could contain narrow fissures or even larger hollow sections deep within its core. Although no comprehensive internal survey has ever been conducted due to both technical limitations and strict preservation regulations that prohibit drilling or excavation. Throughout the 20th century, various attempts were made to study the tower using non-invasive methods, including surface mapping, structural analysis, and limited subsurface imaging. Yet these efforts have yielded only partial insights revealing the density and composition of the rock, but failing to definitively confirm or deny the presence of significant internal cavities, leaving the question of a cave system unresolved and open to interpretation, while occasional reports from climbers and explorers have described unusual sounds, temperature variations, or narrow openings at the base. Observations that, while intriguing, remain anecdotal and scientifically unverified. Adding to the mystery is the tower's isolation, as it rises dramatically from relatively flat terrain with no immediately comparable formations, nearby a feature that has led some alternative theorists to propose that Devil's Tower may have served a purpose beyond geology, suggesting it could have been used as a landmark, a ceremonial site, or even a structure of unknown function in a distant past. Although such claims lack empirical evidence and are generally dismissed by mainstream archaeology, they continue to capture public imagination and contribute to the enduring aura of the site. Modern technology has offered new possibilities for investigation, including ground-penetrating radar and advanced seismic imaging. Yet even these tools face significant challenges when applied to a structure as dense and vertically oriented as Devil's Tower. And as of today, no definitive study has mapped its internal composition in sufficient detail to settle the question of whether a true cave system exists within it, meaning that the concept remains suspended between scientific plausibility and speculative curiosity. What makes Devil's Tower particularly compelling is not merely what is known about it, but what remains hidden, as it occupies a unique intersection between natural wonder, cultural significance, and unresolved scientific inquiry. A place where ancient stories, geological processes, and modern questions converge, creating a layered narrative that continues to evolve with each new generation of observers and researchers. In the end, the Devil's Tower cave system is less a confirmed discovery than a possibility, a reminder that even in an age of advanced technology, there are still places on Earth that resist complete understanding, where the boundary between explanation and mystery remains intact, inviting us to look closer, to question deeper, and to consider that beneath the surface of even the most studied landmarks, there may still be secrets waiting to be uncovered. Rising from the volcanic heart of the Atlantic Ocean, the Canary Islands appear at first glance to be a landscape shaped only by fire, wind, and time. Yet scattered across these rugged terrains are structures that challenge that assumption. Carefully arranged stone formations, terraced platforms, and most controversially step pyramids that seem to echo architectural traditions found thousands of kilometers away. These megalithic structures, particularly those located in Guatemala on the island of Tenerife, have become the center of a quiet but persistent debate. Are they merely the byproduct of agricultural activity, or do they represent the remnants of a forgotten chapter of ancient human ingenuity? The modern story of these structures begins not in antiquity, but in the 20th century, when local farmers and residents had long regarded the stone formations as nothing more than piles cleared from fields. It was not until the late 20th century that these formations began to attract serious attention. In the 1990s, the Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl visited the site and immediately recognized patterns that, in his view, could not be explained by coincidence alone. He observed that the structures were not randomly assembled, but deliberately arranged with flat terraces and geometric precision that suggested intentional design. His involvement transformed what had been dismissed as agricultural debris into a subject of international curiosity and academic scrutiny. Dating the structures, however, has proven far more complex than identifying them. Unlike monumental sites such as pyramids in Egypt or Mesoamerica, the Canary Islands lack written records from the time of their construction. Archaeological studies have suggested that many of the visible structures may have been modified or even constructed during the post-conquest period, possibly as late as the 19th century, when farmers cleared volcanic stones from their land. Yet this explanation does not fully account for the underlying platforms or the orientation of certain pyramids, which appear to align with solar events such as the summer and winter solstices. These alignments have led some researchers to propose that at least part of the site may be older, potentially linked to the indigenous inhabitants of the islands, the Guanche people. The Guanche themselves remain an enduring mystery. Believed to have Berber origins from North Africa, they lived in relative isolation on the islands for centuries before the Spanish conquest in the 15th century. Despite their geographic isolation, they developed complex cultural practices, including mummification of the dead, a ritual that bears striking resemblance to ancient Egyptian traditions. While most scholars attribute this to independent development, others have questioned whether such similarities might hint at deeper, as yet unproven connections. The Guanche left behind no written language, and much of what is known about them comes from archaeological remains and the accounts of early European chroniclers, leaving significant gaps in our understanding of their capabilities and knowledge. Among the most compelling aspects of the Guimar pyramids is their apparent astronomical alignment. Observations have shown that certain structures are oriented toward the setting sun during the summer solstice and the rising sun during the winter solstice. On specific days of the year, shadows cast by the terraces create visual effects that appear almost ceremonial, as if the structures were designed to interact with the movement of celestial bodies. If intentional, this would suggest a level of astronomical awareness that challenges earlier assumptions about the technological and intellectual limitations of the island's ancient inhabitants. It raises a fundamental question: were these people simple pastoral communities, or did they possess a more sophisticated understanding of the cosmos than previously believed? Archaeological investigations over the past decades have attempted to resolve these questions, but the results have been inconclusive. Excavations have revealed that some of the stones used in the pyramids show signs of shaping and deliberate placement, while others appear to have been gathered and stacked in a more utilitarian manner. Radiocarbon dating of nearby materials has provided a broad chronological framework, but has not definitively established the age of the structures themselves. This ambiguity has allowed multiple interpretations to coexist, each supported by fragments of evidence, but none capable of providing a complete explanation. Comparisons with other megalithic traditions further complicate the picture. Step pyramids are most famously associated with civilizations in Mesoamerica, such as the Maya and the Aztec, as well as with ancient Egypt, where monumental stone architecture served both religious and political purposes. The resemblance between these distant traditions and the structures in the Canary Islands has fueled theories of transoceanic contact, suggesting that ancient peoples may have crossed vast stretches of ocean long before the age of European exploration. However, the majority of scholars remain cautious, emphasizing that similar architectural forms can emerge independently in different cultures facing comparable environmental and social challenges. Another layer of mystery lies in the environmental context of the islands themselves. Constructing stable, multi-tiered stone platforms in a volcanic landscape is no small feat. The basalt rock that dominates the terrain is both abundant and difficult to work with, requiring significant effort to shape and transport. The presence of structured terraces and carefully leveled platforms indicates not only labor investment, but also planning and coordination. Whether this effort was directed toward agricultural efficiency, ritual activity, or something else entirely remains an open question. In recent years, the Guatemala site has been preserved and presented as an ethnographic park, allowing visitors to observe the pyramids while engaging with the various theories surrounding their origin. This transformation from overlooked farmland to protected cultural site reflects a broader shift in how such structures are perceived not merely as relics of the past, but as active participants in an ongoing dialogue between history, science, and imagination. Researchers continue to study the site using modern techniques, including digital mapping and geophysical surveys, in the hope of uncovering new evidence that might clarify its origins. Yet perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Canary Islands' megalithic structures is not what is known, but what remains uncertain. They exist in a space between explanation and enigma, where each new discovery seems to raise as many questions as it answers. Were these pyramids the product of pragmatic agricultural practices gradually shaped into more formal structures over time? Were they ceremonial platforms aligned with the heavens, reflecting a spiritual relationship with the cosmos? Or are they fragments of a larger lost narrative, one that connects the Canary Islands to a wider network of ancient cultures across the Atlantic? In the absence of definitive answers, the stones themselves remain silent, weathered by centuries of wind and sun, yet still standing with quiet persistence. They invite observation, interpretation, and debate, reminding us that the past is not always a fixed story, but a landscape of possibilities. And in that uncertainty lies their greatest power, the ability to challenge what we think we know about ancient civilizations, and to suggest that even in the most isolated corners of the world, human history may be far more complex and far more interconnected than we have ever imagined. In the lowlands of southern Guatemala, far from the monumental pyramids that dominate popular imagination, a silent stone face emerges from the earth, weathered, expressionless, and deeply enigmatic. Known today as the Stone Head of Guatemala, particularly those discovered at Monte Alto, these sculptures challenge conventional understanding of ancient Mesoamerican civilizations. Unlike the colossal heads of the Olmec civilization, these figures possess features that seem unexpectedly unfamiliar, raising questions that blur the boundary between archaeology and mystery. The discovery of these stone heads dates back to the early 20th century, when local farmers and explorers began reporting unusual carved stones scattered across the Pacific coastal plains. Initial attention was limited as the region lacked the monumental architecture that typically attracts major archaeological focus. However, as more artifacts surfaced, stone sculptures, altars, and human-like heads, scholars began to recognize Monte Alto as a significant pre-Columbian site. Excavations gradually revealed that the area had once been a thriving ceremonial and cultural center, long before the rise of more widely studied civilizations in the region. Dating these sculptures has proven difficult, but most researchers place them between approximately 2000 BCE and 500 BCE, making them among the earliest large-scale stone carvings in Mesoamerica. Some theories even suggest that Monte Alto represents a cultural phase that predates or overlaps with the early Olmec, hinting at a broader and more complex network of early civilizations than previously understood. Yet despite decades of study, there are no written records, inscriptions, or definitive cultural markers that clearly identify the people who created these heads. Their origins remain frustratingly elusive. What has drawn the most attention and controversy is the appearance of the faces themselves. Unlike the stylized features commonly associated with indigenous Mesoamerican art, these heads often display smooth foreheads, prominent noses, and relatively thin lips. The proportions are strikingly naturalistic, almost portrait-like, leading some observers to argue that they depict real individuals rather than symbolic figures. Others have gone further, suggesting that the features resemble those of populations far beyond the Americas, fueling controversial theories of transoceanic contact long before the voyages of Columbus. Mainstream archaeology, however, urges caution. Scholars argue that artistic variation should not be mistaken for evidence of foreign influence. The diversity of facial features may simply reflect local identity, social hierarchy, or symbolic conventions that are not yet fully understood. It is also possible that these sculptures represent an early experimentation with realism, an artistic direction that later cultures either abandoned or transformed. Without comparative inscriptions or contextual evidence, the true intention behind these features remains open to interpretation. Equally puzzling is the sheer effort required to create these objects. Carved from massive stones, some weighing several tons, the heads would have required significant coordination, labor, and technical skill. The tools available at the time were rudimentary by modern standards, yet the surfaces of the sculptures are often smooth, with carefully defined contours. This raises questions about the methods used. How were such large stones transported across the landscape, and what techniques allowed ancient artisans to achieve such precision? These are questions that echo across many ancient sites, but at Monte Alto, they remain particularly unresolved due to the limited archaeological context. Further excavations throughout the mid and late 20th century uncovered additional elements of the site, including altars and other sculptural forms, suggesting that the heads were not isolated creations, but part of a larger ceremonial or ritual complex. Some researchers have proposed that the heads were positioned in specific alignments, possibly connected to astronomical observations or social rituals. Others suggest they may have served as guardians, ancestors, or representations of elite individuals whose identities have long since been lost to time. One of the more intriguing hypotheses is that these heads function as some of the earliest portrait sculptures in the Americas. If true, this would indicate a level of social organization in which individual identity, perhaps of rulers or revered figures, was important enough to be immortalized in stone. This idea challenges the common assumption that early Mesoamerican art was primarily symbolic or religious, opening the possibility that personal representation played a role much earlier than previously thought. Despite these insights, the site has never been fully excavated, and much of Monte Alto remains buried beneath layers of soil and vegetation. Limited funding, environmental challenges, and shifting academic priorities have all contributed to the incomplete understanding of the area. As a result, each new discovery raises as many questions as it answers, reinforcing the sense that we are only glimpsing a fragment of a much larger and more complex story. Outside the academic world, the stone head of Guatemala has inspired a range of alternative theories. Some suggest contact with distant civilizations, pointing to perceived similarities in facial structure. Others venture into more speculative territory, proposing lost civilizations or even extraterrestrial influence. While these ideas capture the imagination, they lack empirical support and are generally dismissed by the scientific community. Nevertheless, their persistence reflects a deeper truth. These sculptures possess an undeniable aura of mystery that invites interpretation beyond conventional frameworks. Today, the stone heads of Monte Alto stand as quiet witnesses to a forgotten chapter of human history. They do not speak yet, they provoke questions that continue to challenge archaeologists and historians alike. Who were the people who carved these faces, and what did they intend to preserve? Were these images meant to represent individuals' deities or something entirely different? And perhaps most intriguingly, why do these ancient faces seem so unfamiliar, even to those who study them most closely? In the end, the mystery of the stone head of Guatemala lies not only in what we do not know, but in what it suggests that the ancient world was far more diverse, interconnected, and creatively complex than we have yet fully understood.